Hello, everybody, and welcome to the May 28th episode of Trips and Traps. I'm Andy Serling, and once again, joined by Eric Donovan.
And we got 2 episodes to bring you this week, 6 races in total. So why don't we get to the first one here? We're going to take a look at the number 9 horse, Le Grand Cru. This is coming out of the 7th race on May 20th.
Yeah, and I think this race was won by a promising horse, an Angel Pennant Jr. horse named Pinckney Hill, who's now 2 for 2. And Pinckney Hill is in the yellow silks, sort of towards the back of the pack of 7. But the horse we're looking at is the 9, Le Grand Cru. And Le Grand Cru broke well in this race and settled back towards the back of the pack after the start, which I think was a nice move, because ultimately this race seemed to somewhat really fall apart. Now, Le Grand Cru is an Alan Jerkins trained horse, was trying the turf for the first time, had shown some promise on the dirt, but ultimately been disappointing with a lot of second-place finishes at short odds. Now, Le Grand Cru had some turf breeding in here, but it's hard to move from the dirt to the turf. But I believe, all things considered, the way this race was run, Le Grand Cru showed some real promise.
Grand Cru is wide right now and are trying to make a little bit of headway down the backstretch here. The pace seems, I would say, on the fair side. It seems pretty honest. Actually, and the Grand Cru is going to make this move up here. But is this move being made a little bit too soon? Would he have been better off just sitting toward the back of the pack and making one late run?
I think he would have been. Now, obviously, this is a horse that has some speed, so I'm not saying it's that easy to rate him. But I think you have to make a decision, first of all, in general. Are you going to be on the lead or on the pace, or are you taking back? Once you make that decision, you sort of have to stick with it, because to go back early and then rush up in the middle of the race, and now he's making this premature 4-wide move, and you see him all the way out there, and you can see the jockey really asking him, making 4-wide middle moves in the mid-turn in these turf races at a mile, especially 7 furlongs, it's just not a winning move.
It's an excellent point. You're 100% right. And I think that, if you had him being asked for run while he was saving ground, or if he was just wide and kind of hanging out in the back of the pack, it would have been a different story here. But being asked for run while being wide around the turn here, it just doesn't do Le Grand Cru any favors, and still fights on pretty well here in the stretch.
I thought he did. And of course, you see Pinckney Hill, who swept from last, by the way, in the race. Now, he was the best horse, and Le Grand Cru was not beating him in all likelihood. But all in all, here's Le Grand Cru holding on for third here. The horse who finished second comes through towards the inside. He got a very nice trip, and this was a good effort by Le Grand Cru first time out on the turf. And with a more patient ride in the race, he'll win next time, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that was a good little catch there. Kind of very subtle trouble that he had there on the turn. But I think a horse that can move forward, sure.
Yeah, I just like to see a horse. You can't always make the dynamics. So we'll look at a race 2 races later where the dynamics of the race everybody fell victim to. But sometimes you have to make your own trip.
All right, let's get on to the second race now. This is the 6th race from May 22nd. The 2 Class of 63 and the 9 Mindbender, the ones we're looking at. The Class of 63 is the one that has the most trouble in here, though. Yeah,
I mean, we're mostly looking at Class 63, though. I thought Mindbender, who, by the way, was another Alan Jerkins horse, I think, trying the turf for the first time. There's Class 63 on the inside, a very big price in here. Mindbender was 10-1. Now, there's a huge favorite, a 1-2 shot, who ends up finishing third. I thought Mindbender was too close to pace. I'm not saying it's a fault of anybody. This horse has some speed, but when you consider ended up finishing just behind the 1-2 shot, and this was a race that basically collapsed. Once again, the winner coming from last. Mindbender held well, but I thought Class of 63, now maybe this is like me projecting my handicapping, because I thought he was an interesting horse in here off of one turf race. All in all, thought she was closer to the pace than she might have been most comfortable with. She sort of jammed up inside, which some horses aren't comfortable doing, and as we'll see later, she ends up getting shut off in the stretch, though I don't think she had any horse, but she does get shut off, and now she's rushing up almost into third.
Where would you like to see her in this spot? Would you like to see her just be rated all the way toward the back here?
Yes, I would. I was expecting, when I bet a few dollars on her, that she would sitting in back and last, where the eventual winner is Proud Lisa, who's in the back of the field. It's not somebody's fault per se or anything. I'm just thinking, overall, I thought the dynamics and the way this horse runs, she probably would have been towards last. And you can see that Rajiv Mirage has really asked her to run here on the turn. And maybe he feels that she's not running and he needs to motivate her. And maybe she's not happy on the rail. But I just don't think she was ever in a comfortable spot.
It seems like he had to put her on the chase a little bit too soon there from the spot that he was in, just to maintain that position down inside there. We see Class of 63 highlighted again. And things are going to get even dicier for Class of 63 as they come into the stretch here.
Yeah, no question. Now, she has the rail position, has had it the whole way. The second place finisher, who Milan Studart is riding, really kind of takes the position away, and we'll see the head-on in the stretch, and ends up completely shutting off Class of 63, who has to steady back there. Now, Class 63 was not winning this race, finishing second, but she was there with the horse who ends up finishing second, and it's not like she completely collapsed from here, and Class 63 is the one with the position here and loses that position. As you can see, she's on the rail. She's drifted a little bit. She's in about the 1.5 pat there. But, of course, the eventual second-place finisher comes over and really takes away her path.
Yeah, I agree 100%. A very tough trip here for Class of 63, and I think, too, the key factor in this was that, she wasn't winning the race, but she was staying on nicely toward the end after that trouble.
Yeah, I agree, and I just think she was a little closer than she wants to be the pace. She's going to be a very big price. Maybe I'm fishing a little bit, but I think you kind of want to take a look at her next time she runs. If she gets a race with more pace and maybe takes back farther, she might get a piece of the action.
All right, one more race for this first segment. Let's take a look at the 7th race from May 24th. The 3 Upper Gulch and the 8 Half a Surprise are going to break kind of next to each other, one horse in between them, both of them.
Yeah, and this is one. And this is a turf race, and we see it just so much in the mile and 1/8 races and even the mile and 1/4, especially these mile and 1/8 races. You've got Upper Gulch on the outside and the purple silks, and right inside in the blue silks, Half a Surprise. And both of these horses, they're horses that want to come from well back in the race, but of course we get this absurdly slow pace. The speed ends up winning the race, and it completely victimizes both horses.
We see this a lot on the inner turf course here, going a mile and a 16th or a mile and an 1/8, how the speed horses just can slow it down very, very, very nicely on the front end here, and we see that Giant Mover doing just that here. Giant Mover, the number 5 horse on the lead right now, going to set a half in the 49, and just kind of a crawl around the first turn in here, and then you have horses like Upper Gulch and Half a Surprise who are going to be affected by this, and Half a Surprise is kind of going to move a little bit sooner than Upper Gulch, and we'll have a little bit of a debate here as to whether this move coming up by Half a Surprise is a move that helps or hurts.
Yeah, and it is a debate where both sides could be right. You see Half a Surprise has moved into 4th. Upper Gulch is right behind her. Now, Upper Gulch has had the wider trip. Upper Gulch really probably wants to come from farther back, but I believe Half a Surprise's best race was the first race coming from way back. But you're right. What is a rider to do? Do you just let the horse go crawling up front, and then when you end up not being able to catch in the stretch, and the trainer or the fans say, why didn't you move earlier? Or do you make this move which is against your horse's nature and try to get into the game? You sort of can't possibly win. Now, Half a Surprise makes the move right up the lead and ends up fading badly, but I still think she was against it. She's 3 wide here. Upper Gulch is now 6. Jean-Luc Samine has elected to let her drop back more, which would be my more favored way of doing it. But the problem is the pace is so slow. She's still 3 wide, and she ends up doing okay in closing for 4th. And considering the dynamics of the race, she ran well. But everybody's a victim.
I think the dynamics much more up against Upper Gulch in this race than there were Half a Surprise, rather. Keep in mind, Half a Surprise was 2-1 in this race. Slow pace, premature move or not, that move wasn't that strong where Half a Surprise should be fading like this in the stretch and be having no say in the outcome of the finish.
That's a very, very good point. I agree with that, actually, and I do think that Upper Gulch ran better, and that's the one I'm looking to bet. Now, Gold Doro, who was the favorite in this race, who finished 2nd, this is the 2nd time that she has hung. Now, she had a beautiful trip in this race, saving ground, angling out. She has the speed to be closer. I can't wait until Gold Doro runs again to fill out the exacta somewhere, because she's going to be a short price again, and I don't want any part of her as a hanger. I definitely want Upper Gulch, but boy, I'd like to see her get into a race with some pace.
Well, maybe coming up soon. You never know. Drop back to a mile and a 16th on the wide, or even those races seem to be a little bit more pace competitive than the ones on the inner turf.
I agree with you. I would love to see her at a mile or mile 16th on the Widener. These mile and 1/8 races, we just get too many slow paces, and she gets victimized. Also, be nice to do an inside post. Maybe she would be in a position to save ground. No fault of the rider, Jean-Luc Samine. He just couldn't get her inside. There was nothing he could possibly do. A victim the whole way. Anyhow, that does it for this week, the first segment of Trips and Traps. I just want to point out we are not going to be able to film an episode next week with all the Belmont doings and so much going on here, but there's a lot of great information on the Belmont Stakes website, www.belmontstakes.com. So visit that. We'll have this segment next this week. We'll be back after the Belmont with 2 weeks' worth of races, plenty of stuff to do, but for now, belmontstakes.com next week.
And come on right back for the second segment of Trips and Traps.